Says that to a young 24-year-old woman who just buried her sister 30 days before. Surely, this isn't real. The doctor squeezed my hand and waited for me to catch my breath. The look of fear settled on my face as unspoken questions raced through my mind. My favorite doctor stepped into my silence and immediately started answering questions that I didn't trust my words to utter. We caught it in time. You're gonna be fine. But we need to schedule this surgery right away. You do want to get married one day and have kids, right? Married? Kids? What is she saying to me? I collected myself and tried to figure out how I was going to tell my parents when their hearts were already so broken over the tragic loss of my sister. My mother maintained her stance as an unwavering prayer warrior. My father confessed nothing but the word of God over my life. I leaned on their faith when I couldn't find my own. We scheduled the surgery, we held on to each other, and we believed that everything was going to work out just fine. After a month into my recovery, a friend of mine talked me into a road trip that changed my life. 2 hours later, I laid eyes on the nicest man I had ever met in my life. He still is too. He was kind and patient, tall and handsome, and I was completely smitten. His name is Frank Bell.
Yeah.
6 months into this amazing courtship, my favorite doctor rendered the devastating blow of my second diagnosis. The cancer was back, and the damage she suspected needed specialized care. We cried together that day, and she referred me to a specialist who would recommend the next steps and develop my treatment plan. I scheduled the appointment and was surprised when both Frank and my father said they would go with me. Together, we listened to complex medical jargon and viewed ultrasound pictures that screamed of endometriosis, cervical damage, and infertility. Once he stopped to catch his breath, my father asked the doctor outright, "Sir, what exactly are you trying to tell us? What does all of this mean?" The doctor seemed annoyed. He blew out a long breath and said, "Sheila will survive, but she will never be able to have kids. If by some stroke of luck she happens to conceive, she will never carry a baby to term. I recommend a full hysterectomy to save her the heartache and the possibility of a future occurrence of this cancer. We need to schedule the surgery now. I'm available next week. See the nurse on your way out and set up a pre-op appointment." On and on, blah, blah, blah. I don't remember much else that happened that day, but I do remember that my family and my future husband and I agreed that I would not have a hysterectomy. Once again, we scheduled the surgery, we held on to each other, and we trusted God with the results. After the surgery, the doctor arrogantly told of his skillful removal of tissue and tumors and scraping of cells. He also confirmed the damage that he suspected and reminded my family that we should have heeded his counsel regarding the hysterectomy. He told my father he would surely see us again in a year or two when the cancer returned. Frank and my parents refused to accept this diagnosis, and they never confessed the doctor's words as my truth. Once the treatment plan was underway, all I could think about was, how am I going to get rid of this wonderful man? He didn't deserve any of this, and he should be with someone who could give him a family. When I told him so, his faith spoke louder than my fears. He told me that he loved me, that I would be his wife, and one day I would bear his child. His unwavering confession of faith planted a seed of hope in my heart that was watered by prayer, numerous prophecies, and a promise that God would open my womb. just like Hannah. So instead of believing the doctor, we chose to believe the report of the Lord.
Come on.
And we waited and trusted Him for my total healing. Our families kept praying, believing God along with us. And after a while, that seed of hope turned into a tree of life. And I was about to experience the miracle of its fruit. After celebrating my birthday in early 2000, it was time for another appointment with my favorite doctor. When the exam was over, I got up to get dressed, but the nurse came in and asked me not to leave. There was no panic in her voice, and there seemed to be a mischievous grin on her face. The minutes ticked by slowly as I waited, and I could hear footsteps running back and forth, and people were laughing. The door opened. The doctor stood before me with tears in her eyes. I held my breath. In each hand, she held a positive pregnancy test. One for her and one for me to take home to my family.
Yeah.
But how could this be? Our families were elated, but I was scared to death. The doctor said we needed to get past the first trimester and well into the second before we would be out of the woods. But to offset my fears, God assembled a covenant family who met at the battle station every week for prayer. In time, prayer, prophecy, and the promise prevailed, and our daughter Trinity was born in December of that same year. We were overjoyed. Our story blessed many families, and we were satisfied that God's promise of healing was proven through her birth. Little did we know that God wasn't finished yet. A few years later, we were leading a powerful service when one of the elders stopped us and said he had a word from the Lord for me. I trusted this man of God, but I was not prepared for what he was about to say. He told me that God wasn't through, and that the birth of Trinity was indeed a gift, but it was not the fulfillment of the promise regarding my healing. The promise was that God would heal me completely and shut the mouth of the doctor. He told me that within 12 months I would be pregnant again, and this time the doctor would have to admit that the first pregnancy wasn't a fluke. He would have to admit this was a miracle and that God had completely healed my womb. I wept. I just didn't want to go through all of that again. I was satisfied with one child, and I didn't want to challenge God or my body trying to make a point to anybody. But our God is faithful. And His word also came to pass just as it was spoken. Our second daughter, Zion Sheree, was born in November of 2004. My favorite doctor shook her head in submission to the power of God and informed my surgeon of the second child. He conceded by sending a set of ultrasound pictures, which were given to me to add to my pregnancy test from before. After reviewing the images, my favorite doctor confirmed that only God's hand could have cut this child in my womb until the appointed time.
Come on.
Even with complications, God was faithful.
Yes.
Since the birth of our girls, we post the results of my yearly exam on the refrigerator every year.
Come on.
To show and to give honor to the God who heals.
Yes.
We look at our girls and we know that God is a healer, even in the most difficult situations. We know that even when physical healing doesn't come quickly, that God can heal our hearts with peace and grace and strength to endure.
Yes.
When we hold our daughters in our arms, we know that God specializes in things that seem impossible.
Come on, yes.
Finally, we learned that we could move from fear to faith when we put our trust in Him, in prayer, and stand on His precious promises. He is Jehovah Rapha.
Yes.